Nero kicked his pregnant wife in the stomach, and she died. That was it. No trial, no warning, just a blow from the emperor's boot to the belly of the only woman he ever claimed to love. She collapsed on the marble floor of the palace, bleeding out with their unborn child still inside her. And while she lay there, gasping her final breaths, the most powerful man in the world begged her to live, as if his word could undo what his violence had just destroyed. Her name was Poppaea Sabina, and she was everything Nero had ever wanted in a woman. Beautiful, manipulative, politically brilliant. She knew how to bend the court to her will and how to keep Nero's ego fed. But one night in 65 AD, she said too much. Maybe she mocked his singing. Maybe she questioned his priorities. The historians disagreed on the details, but they all agreed on the outcome. Nero lashed out, and Poppaea never got up again. He didn't order her execution. He just did it himself, and that's what made it worse. Because when the fog of rage lifted and he realized what he'd done, Nero broke, not in grief, in madness. He didn't arrange a funeral. He had her body embalmed and displayed like a goddess. He refused cremation. He refused mourning. He refused to let her go. He walked the halls speaking to her corpse. He dined alone but ordered a second plate for her. He placed her in a golden tomb, surrounded by flowers, guarded by silence. And behind the locked doors of his palace, he whispered to her as if she was still breathing, because to him she still was. Poppaea had been dead for weeks, but Nero never stopped speaking to her. He gave orders in her name, left her favorite seat empty at dinners, demanded courtiers refer to her in the present tense. Anyone who dared use the word was instead of is was exiled or killed. It was delusion turned policy. The empire bent around his hallucination. He had statues of her carved in ivory and gold, eyes lined with gemstones, lips painted with imported dyes. Her scent was burned in censers throughout the palace, her voice mimicked by trained performers who recited imagined messages from beyond the grave. Nero didn't want memory, he wanted presence, and when marble and perfume weren't enough, he started looking for something or someone more real. And then, one afternoon in the palace corridors, he saw a boy. The servants bowed, as usual, but Nero stopped walking. His eyes locked onto one face. The boy didn't speak, didn't smile, but something about him, something impossible, made Nero's chest tighten. It was the eyes, the jawline, the delicate mouth. The boy looked like her. He didn't ask the boy's name. It didn't matter. He didn't see a child. He saw a chance to undo the one thing even emperors couldn't reverse. This boy would not serve him. This boy would become her. The boy's name was Sporus. He was young, maybe 14, maybe 15, a palace servant, educated, quiet, raised in the shadow of Rome's imperial machinery. And from the moment Nero saw him, he stopped being a person. Nero didn't request his service. He claimed him. He didn't ask for consent. He issued a command. The transformation began with the blade. Sporus was dragged to the palace's medical wing, if you could call it that. It wasn't a place for healing. Not that day. The best physicians in the empire were summoned, not to save a life, but to disfigure it. Their task was simple: destroy the boy's manhood, make him more like her. Castration in ancient Rome was brutal. Crude tools, no anesthesia. The body was held down. The screaming was ignored. Blood loss often killed the patient before infection could. But Nero wanted Sporus alive, just no longer male. When it was over, the boy was left in bed for days, fevered, bleeding, shattered. And once he could stand, they brought him silk. They dressed him in Poppaea's gowns, lined his eyes with kohl, painted his lips red, gave him earrings that once dangled from the ears of the woman now buried in Nero's shrine. He was renamed Sabina, not asked, renamed, and he was trained, not taught how to rule, but how to walk like her, sit like her, smile like her. Sporus spent hours a day being drilled in gestures that mimicked a corpse. Tutors corrected his posture. Maids sculpted his hair. Makeup artists taught him how to conceal what couldn't be removed. And when the transformation was nearly complete, Nero made the announcement there would be a wedding. He would marry the boy, and the empire would attend. In the spring of 67 AD, Nero married the boy he had mutilated. The palace was draped in silk. Thousands of oil lamps lined the imperial hall. Gold-threaded banners fluttered in the breeze. Musicians played wedding hymns, and at the center of it all stood Nero, draped in ceremonial robes, and beside him, the boy, Sporus, now called Sabina, now called wife. He wore Poppaea's jewelry, her wedding gown, her perfume. The emperor kissed him before a crowd of nobles and priests, swearing eternal devotion to the woman he had already murdered. There were vows, signed documents, toasts raised with trembling hands. The Senate looked on, too afraid to question what they were watching, because what they saw wasn't a wedding, it was a funeral in reverse. A resurrection scripted by a madman, carried out through the body of a child. After the ceremony, Nero gave him quarters in the palace, a staff of servants, an official title, and a throne beside his own. But these weren't gifts, they were stage props. Sporus wasn't being honored, he was being used, forced to mimic the dead every waking moment. He appeared at public functions, smiling beneath painted lips, sat beside Nero at imperial dinners, walked beside him in litters through Roman streets. When Nero told stories of Poppaea's life, Sporus was expected to nod, pretend he remembered things that never happened to him. He was no longer a servant, but he wasn't a person either. He was a performance, a breathing altar to Nero's guilt. And every time the emperor looked at him, it wasn't Sporus he saw, it was her. In 68 AD, Rome turned on Nero. Rebellions flared across the provinces. Governors stopped obeying. Armies broke their oaths. The Senate declared the emperor an enemy of the state. His once mighty name, spoken in whispers and fear, was now a death sentence. Nero fled the city with a few loyalists. And of course, Sporus was one of them. Even in exile, Nero couldn't let go of the illusion. He still dressed the boy in Poppaea's robes, still called him Sabina, still made him sleep beside him in a borrowed villa as enemies closed in. Eventually, Nero was cornered. His options vanished. And rather than face public execution, he took his own life, shoving a dagger into his own throat while a servant helped push the blade through. For a moment, the nightmare was over, but Sporus didn't find freedom. He found a new kind of captivity. Now he was a symbol, a relic of a disgraced emperor, a living joke passed between men who claimed power after Nero's death. First Nymphidius Sabinus, then Otho, then Vitellius. Each treated him the same, as an ornament, a possession, a reminder of Rome's darkest spectacle. But Vitellius went further. He announced that Sporus would be used for public entertainment, a mock marriage, a theatrical rape in the Colosseum, reenacting a mythical scene involving violation and shame. A crowd would cheer, soldiers would laugh, the boy would be destroyed before thousands. And Sporus knew this would be the final erasure, so he made the only decision that was truly his. He took his own life, likely by poison, just before the performance. He was no older than 20. No one wrote his words. No one recorded what he believed. The boy who once had a name was remembered only as a shadow, a silence, a body turned into an echo of someone else's madness. But in the end, Sporus made one final, quiet act of defiance. He chose not to be erased again. Sporus wasn't remembered as a boy. He wasn't remembered as a human being. He was remembered as an echo, a shadow, a body that was never allowed to belong to itself. And that's the true horror of this story. Not just what Nero did, but how the world watched and stayed silent. So if this story disturbed you, let it stay with you. Let it remind you what power becomes when no one says no. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, don't scroll away. Drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from.